What if the villain in the Scream movies wasn't the killer, but the movie itself? The film, the entire franchise, from that iconic opening phone call in 1996 to the blood-soaked nostalgia trip hitting theaters in 2026, has operated under one single radical idea. What if horror movies stopped pretending they didn't know they were horror movies? That question sounds simple, but the way Scream answers it and keeps answering it across 7 films and 30 years is one of the most philosophical, interesting experiments in mainstream genre cinema. Today, we're gonna pull apart how it works, why it matters, and what Scream 7 does with the legacy of that idea. To understand what Scream did, you have to understand what horror looked like right before it arrived. By the mid-90s, the slasher genre was essentially death. The golden era, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street had collapsed under the weight of its own sequels. These franchises had made so many films with diminishing returns each time that the genre had become essentially a self-parody without even meaning to be one. Audiences had figured out the formula. Horny teenagers go somewhere isolated, they get killed one by one in increasingly elaborate ways, and maybe one virtuous girl survives. The end. Kevin Williamson, a young screenwriter who grew up obsessed with horror films, noticed something. He noticed that the audiences were smarter than the movies thought they were. Everyone watching these films already knew the rules. They could predict every death, every twist, every cheap jump scare. Horror had become a genre in conversation with no one. So Williamson wrote a script originally called A Scary Movie that put the conversation on screen. And he handed it to Wes Craven, the man who had invented some of those very tropes, with A Nightmare on Elm Street. And together they made something genuinely strange. A slasher film where the characters had seen all the same slasher films the audiences has. The result is Randy Meeks, the movie character, the movie's self-declared horror film expert. Standing at a party, holding a beer while Halloween plays on the TV behind him, he explains to his friends, who are currently being stalked by a real death killer, the 3 rules you must follow to survive horror movies.
Number 1, you can never have sex. Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. Number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back, because you won't be back.
And what makes this scene more than just a clever joke is what happens immediately after Randy finishes speaking. Stu, one of the killers we don't know yet, looks right at Randy and says, I'll be right back. And then he walks out of frame and he dies. The film knows the rules. The film breaks the rules on purpose, and then the film punishes the characters for breaking the rules, which is itself one of the rules. This layering is what literally critics call metatextuality. A text that is aware of itself as a text, and that becomes one of the conventions of its own genre from within the genre. But Scream doesn't just comment, it weaponizes the commentary. The meta-awareness isn't the creation, it's the engine of the horror. When Sydney's boyfriend Billy asks her, what's your favorite scary movie? He isn't just making small talk. He's the horror movie. He's quoting the genre at her while he's plotting to kill her. In this, the knowledge of horror becomes the power. And a kind of a trope. Scream was a huge hit, and so inevitably Scream 2 was made. But here's where it gets genuinely brilliant. Within the world of Scream, this fictional universe where Sidney Prescott really did survive a Ghostface killer, someone wrote a book about the Woodsboro murders, and someone made the book into a movie, and that movie is called Stab. Think about what that means for a moment. In 1997, people went to the cinema to watch Scream 2, a film about characters who go to the cinema to watch Stab. It's a film about the events of Scream. We are watching fictional characters watch a fictional version of something that was already fictional. The layers of representation stack like mirrors facing each other, producing an infinite regression of storytelling. And Craven and Williamson do something absolutely vicious with it. The opening of Scream 2 shows a crowd of real horror fans within the film's universe watching a slasher movie, screaming and cheering at the violence, wearing Ghostface's costume as a joke, while a real Ghostface killer murders them from within the audience. The spectators of horror become its victims. The people who thought they were safely outside the story, consuming it as entertainment, discover they were inside of it all along. This is Scream commenting not just on horror films, but also on horror audiences, on us, on you watching this video essay. The question it asks is uncomfortable. What does it mean to enjoy stories about violence? Who are we when we watch horror films? Are we Randy, the enthusiast who thinks his knowledge makes him safe? Or are we the audience in the Stab theater, whose enjoyment of spectacle become their doom? Scream 3 pushes this even further by sending Sydney and Gail into an actual set of Stab 3, where they walk through a recreation of Sydney's own house. It's confronting literal stage sets made to simulate her trauma. The film becomes a mediation on how stories crystallize and commodify real human suffering. Sydney has to pass through a fake version of her own life to reach the truth hidden behind it. By Scream 4, the franchise has matured into something comfortable with its own mythology, and Williamson used the film to attack a new cultural phenomenon: the obsession with viral fame and the social media performance of identity. The killer in Scream 4 wants to remake the original murders in order to become the Stab franchise he wants to start in his own story. It's a film about people who have internalized the meta-narrative so completely that they try to live inside of it. After Wes Craven's death and died in 2015, the franchise went quiet for a while. And when it returned in 2022, simply titled Scream, it was in the hands of Matt Bettinelli and Tyler Gillett, who had made the excellent Ready or Not. And their entry introduced a new concept, the Requel, a film that functions both as a reboot and as a sequel. And the 2022 Scream is self-aware about being a requel, the same way the 1996 is self-aware about being a slasher. It critiques the legacy sequel phenomenon that happened in Hollywood at the time, like Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, Terminator Dark Fate, Star Wars The Force Awakens, God, and all of it while being one of itself. And the killer here are hardcore Stab fans who are furious that the recent Stab entries had betrayed the spirit of the originals. They're making the murder they feel the franchise deserves.
Because nobody takes the true fans seriously. Not really. They just laugh at us. And why? Because we love something? We're just a fucking joke to them? How can fandom be toxic? It's about love. They don't fucking understand these movies are important to people.
This is the franchise's most pointed cultural commentary since the original. It's a film about toxic fandom, about the dangerous entitlement of people who believe they own stories that were never theirs. It's the killer. The killer in Scream 2022 aren't just people with personal grievances. They're critics with knives. They are the comment section given form and given a weapon. Scream 6 then moved to New York, expanding the mythology, and gave us a Ghostface who was preserving a museum of ghost killers' artifacts, a shrine of the franchise itself, which is a strange and beautiful image. This Ghostface had turned horror movie history into kind of a religion. And now we arrive at Scream 7, directed by Kevin Williamson himself, the original architect, returning 30 years later to the house he built. Before we talk about the film, we have to talk about what happened off screen, because in Scream's world, the decision between those two things has always been kind of blurry. The lead actress Melissa Barrell was fired. Jenna Ortega departed. The directors who revived the franchise left for another project, and the film was essentially rebuilt from scratch. Neve Campbell returned after refusing to appear in Scream 6 due to a pay dispute, and the film actually acknowledges this. Characters within the movie make pointed reference to Sydney's having sat out during the previous entry. The real-world contract disputes become a plot point. Reality has collapsed into the fiction again. The story of Scream 7 begins fittingly with a couple of Stab franchise fans visiting Stu Maher's house, which is now a tourist attraction. It is the site of the original 1996 murders, and that means that someone is turning real death into entertainment and charging admission. And then, of course, Ghostface appears. What Scream 7 is doing, at least on its best moments, is something the franchise has never quite attempted to do, or at least not so explicitly. It is making a film about the experience of living inside a franchise. Because in this movie, Sidney Prescott doesn't just have a killer hunting her. She has a whole mythology pursuing her. She has a Stab movie, she has a Stab sequel, she has a fan community, and a tourist house, and a Wikipedia page about her own worst memories. And she is a character who knows she is a character. Not just in a horror film, but in a whole horror film franchise. And now she has a daughter who is inherited all of that. And that is very, very interesting, because the generational theme is what makes Scream 7 kind of moving. Sydney's mother, Maureen Prescott, set the original murders in motion in 1996. Sydney's existence as a public figure is what creates the Stab franchise. And now her daughter, Tatum, is gonna grow in the shadow of that entire history as the franchise's third generation. The question the film poses is whether the cycle of trauma and commodification can end, whether a story can be laid to rest, whether the genre, which feeds on repetition, can ever truly let this character go. Scream 7 also incorporates AI and deepfakes into its plot, which is worth pausing on. Because Ghostface in this entry can use AI-generated voices and faces to impersonate people. A technology that threatens to dissolve the already very thin boundary between real between reality and performance. And in a franchise that has always been about the dangers of treating violence as entertainment, this is a very pointed metaphor. When anyone's image can be manufactured and weaponized, and when death can be simulated and distributed instantly, the horror films worrying about spectatorship takes on a new urgency. The film brings back characters who, by the logic of its story, should be dead, including, in some capacity, Matthew Lillard's Stumacher, who was killed by Sidney in the first film. And one of the characters lampshades this directly, saying that that's a ridiculous retcon for any franchise. No. The film is commenting on its own plot while executing it. So it knows it's cheating, it tells you it's cheating, it cheats anyways, and that is the Scream franchise in a nutshell. So what is Scream finally about? I think it's a franchise about the relationship between stories and the people who make them, both the filmmakers and the audience. It asks, why do we need horror? What do we get from sitting in the dark and watching people be killed? What does it mean to turn real tragedy into entertainment? And what happens to people whose real life become someone else's entertainment? The Stab franchise within the Scream universe is exactly this comment. Stab is tasteless, it's exploitative, it's commercially motivated and oddly beloved. And it turns Sidney's worst moments into crowd-pleasing spectacle. And Scream, the real film we're watching, knows it is doing something very similar. It is horror entertainment made from horror entertainment made from real trauma. Every meta joke, it's kind of a confession. This is what separates Scream from mere cleverness. Lots of films are self-referential. Lots of horror films know their tropes. But Scream uses its self-awareness to generate discomfort. It doesn't let you just enjoy the horror while staying at a distance. It keeps finding ways to collapse that distance. It keeps telling you that you are inside the movie you think you're watching safely from the outside. The evolution across 7 films is the evolution of the genre itself. In 1996, it was about the slasher. In 1997, it was about the experience of slasher. And in 2022, it was about the toxicity of fandom. And in 2026, it is about the inheritance of trauma and how AI is erasing the boundary between real and fiction. So it's asking, what does it cost us to consume violence? And what does it cost to the people inside the stories? Scream 7 is not a perfect film. No, Scream is a perfect film, arguably. But it is a film that takes seriously the weight of what the franchise has built. The mythology, the meta layers, the generational trauma, and it asks whether any of us, inside or outside the story, can finally put Ghostface down. The answer, as it always is in this franchise, is probably no, because we keep buying the tickets, because we keep watching it, and Ghostface keeps calling back. Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Thank you very much for watching this video. If you made it all the way to here, I think you liked it. I hope at least you liked it. Leave a comment as always, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to watch another movie, this time a Nix rated movie, commenting about the people who's watching it, don't miss watching this video. Thank you very much and see you next week.